Absolute pleasure to be in the Northern Rivers again, and the Northern Rivers has made my job very, very easy, because when I first got elected to New South Wales Parliament, a story had just broken just a few months before that there was CSG drilling in St Peters in Sydney, and people were really looking around at where else this coal seam gas was occurring, and people were saying, oh, there's this Kieron gas squad. There's some people up in the Northern Rivers who have got a similar issue. By the way, there's the industry's emerged in Queensland, and there's some petroleum exploration licences that have been taken out over about a third of the state. You should really get yourself informed. And to be honest, I thought coal seam gas, how big could it be? I've never heard of it before, and I've got other things to do. But since that time, working with a lot of you in this room, it has come to dominate and be my singular focus. It's been the number one thing, and I've just done it all day, every day. I'm just an absolute... It's a pleasure to work with people, because you make me look good. Because I turn up in Parliament and I say, do you know this is happening? Do you know that's happening? Do you know they've done this? Do you know you haven't done this? Do you know these people have said this? Like in Lismore, these communities all around, locking the gate, gas bill free. Did you know about the pollution incident? And I go into the Parliament and I remind the politicians that this is an issue that won't go away. It's massive in nature. And by getting that information from you, hearing from you, the data, the statistics, the reality of what a mature gas industry means for a community, I'm able to go into Parliament and represent you. I know that sounds pretty simple, but it's remarkable in the modern age, because a lot of those politicians don't do that. They don't go in there and represent the interests of the broad community, the long-term interest of the community, that intergenerational interest. They're in there, part of a revolving door of politicians moving from industry into politics and back into industry, that we see again and again and again. And it is an absolute cancer on our democracy. The fact that
to take massive cash donations in the United States and then turn around and do whatever industry instructs them to do. We even have this wonderful thing called ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. And for a small annual fee, our lawmakers, primarily the federal lawmakers and our governors, are members of ALEC. ALEC takes them all these fancy resorts and wines them and dines them with fancy meals and grand events, and then they lay out the legislation for the next year and tell them what laws they want passed. Our own governor was recently a keynote speaker at one of the ALEC conventions in Washington, D.C. So if you think politicians can't be bought and sold, and it doesn't matter what party, I mean, we've only got two of the worthless groups in our state, or in our country. Neither one of them give a damn about what the average person's going through. It's all about, when they get done passing the laws that make it advantageous for these corporations to make money, that they can go and work for those corporations. It's happened with the GMO seeds, whatever your opinion may be of that. They revolved right through our government, got the rules passed, and went right back to the GMO seeds. The oil companies have done the same. It's so bad in the state of Pennsylvania that they've actually published a book called Pennsylvania Politics and the Revolving Door of Industry. Over 50 of their highest elected officials from the last 10 years now work in the oil and gas industry. And these are the people that passed all the rules that allow the industrialization and the drilling of the dairy farms and all the fresh food farms in Pennsylvania to take place, that allow the fracking waste to be disposed of in the rivers, to the point where the city of Pittsburgh had to shut off their freshwater intake for over a month because the contamination levels were so high in the river. And the problem is that these companies don't know international balance. When Jeremy came to the United States and stood with us behind our house and spoke, and we toured him around, and showed him what was going on. About a week later, we all met in Washington, D.C. for a rally trying to get our government to take notice. And there were a couple of guys wandering around, and a friend of mine who was a community organizer and one of the bravest people I've ever known started taking pictures of these people. She goes, look, there's a couple of industry people here. And she started taking pictures of them, and they held their hands up and said they didn't want their pictures taken. But lo and behold, about 3 days later, when I get home to Pavilion, Wyoming, guess who shows up on my doorstep? It's Santos Gas employees from Australia. And they're wanting to know what's going on in my place. They followed my mother-in-law home from the post office and invited themselves out and wanted to tell me how good natural gas was and what a benefit it was going to be to the Australian people, and they wanted to see how it was done in the United States. So we showed them the door pretty quick. You know, you don't, I'm going to be crude for a minute in the United States. You don't piss on my head and tell me it's raining. And that's what they've been doing to us for a long time. So now here's the mess we're left with, because we've had the people that we thought we elected independently that are supposed to represent us. This is what Pavilion looks like now. And this may be kind of hard to see, but the blue dots are water wells. Our domestic water wells that we get our water for our homes from, and our cattle and our gardens, and the red wells are gas wells. This is a small gas field. This is just a shade over 200 wells. Tight sands, they said, oh, this is the easy stuff to get. And we're paying a horrible price for it. Our property right now is worth zero. We couldn't sell our place if we wanted to. We couldn't give our property away if we wanted to. My wife was here. Her family has lived there for 60 years. We have 4 generations. Kathy's parents are there. My wife and I are there, our children, and we have 3 grandchildren. We wanted them to have the opportunity and the ability to learn the things that we learned. We wanted them to have the ability to disconnect from the modern world, to go out and learn what it's like to work with an animal, to learn where your food comes from, to learn what it's like to put in a hard day's work and feel good about it at the end of the day. We can't even hardly go outside at times because the fumes from the production tanks are horrible. We have BTEX chemicals that evaporate out of the tanks. You can taste it. We've seen health impacts. We have children with nosebleeds, with seizures, with kidney failure if they're bathed in the water, allowed to drink the water before we got the testing done. We have adults, the women suffer terribly from neurological conditions, neuropathy, numbing of the arms and the fingers and legs and toes, and cognitive deficits where the thought process is interrupted and slowed down. And these are people I've known my whole life, brilliant, hardworking, very honest people that wanted nothing more than to have the life that they've built. We have men who, when you're working outside exposed to this for 12 or 14 hours a day, chronic fatigue, chronic headaches, ringing in the ears, and not the kind of fatigue that comes from a hard day's work, the kind of fatigue where you sleep all night and can't get up in the morning and you're just dead tired and you don't have any energy. And guys who are used to working hard and are just run down now. It takes a horrible, horrible toll on you. So after you survive the drilling, after you survive the fracking, after you survive people coming and going in massive truckloads of equipment up and down little gravel roads, then you've got an active gas field that has to be operated, hopefully, in some sort of correct manner. This is about 30 feet away from the main irrigation canal that feeds the 200 acres of our place with water. And this is a production tank that holds all the produced water that includes drilling chemicals, flowback chemicals from the hydraulic fracturing, as well as any of the petroleum hydrocarbon compounds that exist underground. Something else that you also have to remember is when you take the naturally occurring petroleum hydrocarbons and you introduce these chemicals from the fracking and drilling process and you pressurize them to crack the ground, and you put them under the heat and the pressure that's underground, you create other compounds that a lot of them have never been seen before. The scientists we work with often refer to them as daughter compounds or tentatively identified compounds. So what happened here was the man backed up to the production tank, loaded some water in the back of his truck, and when he drove away, he forgot to remove the hose from the back of the truck. And it ripped the fitting out of the back of the truck. So he just drove around in a circle until all the water was gone out of his truck and then went home for the day. We happened to be thinking about moving cows on through here. We were going through opening gates and making sure the way was clear. And here's this big pool of black bubbly water. That what had happened is out there when they drill, and I've talked to some people that said there's some problems with this in a lot of Australia. When you drill a gas well or an oil well, the drill pipe is hollow and they pump the mixture drill mud down through the middle of the pipe. It lubricates the bit, and that helps bring all the cuttings and stuff back to the top. They come up the outside of the pump. They go to a mud tank that has a shaker that separates the mud and the cuttings and allows them to dispose of the cuttings and do what they have to do with the mud. But there's something called lost circulation that occurs. That's where the mud goes down, and on its way back up the bore, finds an exit and takes off out into the substructure. So they had huge problems with that in the pavilion area. They use stuff, they call it lost circulation.